Hello everyone, welcome back to Art on the Creek. My name is Anne, and these are the supplies that we're going to be using today. I've got a full supply list in the description below. You can look at that at your leisure and decide what you need and what you would like to get, but as always, use whatever you have on hand, because when you're just beginning, or even if you're a seasoned professional, when you're watercoloring for practice, and that's what all these lessons are aimed at, you can use whatever you like. Even if you raid your kid's backpack and take their school paints, that's fine. Whatever you can use to get brush onto paper, that's the best place to begin. So with that said, let's learn how to paint a red bell pepper. That said, let's jump into this bell pepper. Now, I know that my dear friends in Australia call it a capsaicin, and I have a question for all of you folks from Australia that are watching. Is that just the red bell pepper, or do you refer to all bell peppers that way? Just a curious question there. Let me know in the comments if you are from down under and have some thoughts on bell peppers. This one is just so pretty. You know, I do love bell peppers. We use them a lot in our cooking here in the house, and yeah, I think they're delicious, so I thought it would be fun to paint one. For the supplies today, I've got a polymer eraser, a pencil, the paint brushes, and all of these are outlined down below in the description. Cotton watercolor paper, a set of Winsor Newton Cotman paints, and the one thing I'm not showing here that we will also need is some saran wrap. We're going to have some fun with that as well. Here is the link to that one if you're interested in painting these chocolate-covered strawberries. And now I've got a bell pepper, so what I'm going to do with this one is turn my painting. I'm just going to turn it this way, my book rather. I'm going to turn it this way because I'm right-handed and I don't want to smudge this. I like to get my reference photos for you guys from Unsplash or Pixabay because they have many, many free reference photos. Whenever you are using a reference photo, it's always best to just use your own photo. But if you can't do that or don't want to do that for whatever reason, I definitely recommend going to one of these free reference photo sites. There's a Facebook page that is called Free Reference Photos for Artists, or there's also Paint My Photo. There's a lot of them. And in fact, if you know of any others, mention them in the comments so that we can all share from this knowledge, because it's, yeah, artists are always looking for free sources. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of the drawing on this one for you so that we can kind of start with a common ground. So I'm going to start with, you can't really see it in the photo, but this is where the stem will meet the bell pepper. Now, in reality, the bell pepper is going to come up above that, but that's okay. This is just for my anchoring purposes. And then there is this plane on the top where the ridges are, okay? Now, all of this is really very sketchy. No pun intended, it's intended to be sketchy. Because what we want to do is just kind of get that basic layout of where we're going to put things, and that way we'll make sure that we don't go off our page or make something too big or too small. Every time I skip this step, I tend to go off the page. so let's do this together. I'm holding the pencil at the far end in the back, and I'm just letting my wrist create the curve here, and I'll move my wrist up to kind of get that curved angle the way I want. And then there's a point up here that it comes to. I'm just going to make note of that for now. And then I'm going to come down on this side, and here's where you might want to turn your book. If you're right-handed or left-handed, turn it the appropriate direction. We're going to come up, and then we're going to go in and back out. We want to remember that this is a natural item. Now see, I went too far. There we go. And we don't want to make it just an oval because there's an awful lot going on here, and that's one of the things that is the most appealing. So this lobe here that comes up above the stem, from that lobe we come straight down, and that creates the cleft. So we kind of want to hit that dot that we made. So we're coming up for the lobe, down to the cleft, and then this is going to be our low point here. And we have another slight lobe going in here, It follows this curve line here a little bit, but not as much. And it's just going to come down right about here. Now this, I want to clean this line up just a little bit. You can use your brush to get rid of the eraser crumbs if you like, or you can use some other kind of a big fluffy brush to do that. And then let's see, this lobe is going to come up from here. We've got this lobe comes up this high. Now I'm going to leave my lines a little bit darker so that you guys can see what I'm drawing here. But in reality, if you don't want your pencil lines to show, you can take the time to lightly erase these. So now I've got these two lobes here, this one and the one on the right. There's one that comes around the back here like so. And I just want to place that in because right where it starts to come up, there's our stem. So we want this, the stem has a big ending point here, kind of looks like a periscope. Or, oh my gosh, we just watched the movie Alien. It looks like the little alien popping out. So we were snowed in pretty much this past week, and we didn't want to go outside. We didn't want to do anything. We were tired. So we are going through all of our DVDs, and that was the one that caught our attention, was the quadrilogy of the Alien movies. What is your favorite Alien movie? Let me know. Mine is number 2. Number 1 is great for its grittiness. But number 2 was by far, I think, the best. So let me know. Let me know what your favorite Alien movie is, or if you don't like that kind of a movie, then what genre do you like? What do you like to do when you're not painting? Right? We all have other things to do in life. Now, here's something I want to explain to you. We'll go back talking about our pepper here. We'll leave Ripley and the aliens for another moment in the conversation if she comes back up.
I hope you're right.
Do you see that on this side it is much lighter than this side? So I'm going to put, it's because our light source is over here, I'm going to put a faint line down the middle. There's a little crease right here where it gets much darker. This shades over this way because this has some, it's like a dome, this bottom part here. It's a dome and then a big post that comes up, a big round stem. So we've got to mark these shadows pretty carefully because in art, the thing that will convey our message to our viewing audience is how we place these shadows. So I'm putting these lines here to remind me, and let's see if I can remember what I'm actually painting, that some of these areas are lighter than the other areas. So whatever it is that you need to do to demarcate those things. Here we've got, this area is going to be darker in here, right under here is going to be darker, and then down here will be darker still, and then up here and so on. So we will get to all of that. We've got this stem in here. Let's go back to our lobes. This comes up this way, and behind it we've got one more lobe here, and then this lobe is going to come out this way, so I'm going to make that connect there. And this little guy is just peeking out the back. We don't see him for too long, because now we have this beauty coming right here. Somebody told me once that depending upon how many lobes there are on your green pepper will tell you if it's a male green pepper or a female green pepper. Have you heard that? If you know something about that, let me know in the comments. I love bell peppers. My favorite way to cook them is just by roasting them. And this particular one, I think I have this little cleft here a little too high, but this particular one, I would have made a beeline for this one in the produce department at the store and purchased this one right straight away because it is gorgeous. All right. Now, since you guys are watching this on camera, like I said, I'm going to leave all of my lines here, but this is a good opportunity for you to pull out your kneaded eraser. Now, it does have to be kneaded in order to use it. Here, this one's been worked a little bit more. There we go. So you want to knead it, and this will clean it. Still haven't used this very much lately. This will clean it and get it ready to use. Oy. All right, we're going to have a little musical interlude here while I work this. All right, well, there, I've lost patience. Normally Normally these pull like taffy, but that's not happening for me today. It is warming up though. It is getting softer. So normally I will sit and fidget with these, but I haven't in a while. So what I'm doing now is I'm just going to press it into kind of a little roll, and then you can just take these and gently roll over your work. See how that lightens that up a bit? And then, of course, you would stretch it some more to clean it. Now, you can go more and more depending upon if you want those pencil lines to disappear completely. I like the pencil lines because that is the DNA from which this painting is going to come. So there we go. Now, one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a piece of paper towel over this side just to protect it a little bit. And there we go. Because I want to put my paints here. So the paints we're using. I have my Winsor Newton Cotman set here, like I told you, and I've used it a little bit. In fact, I just got a bunch of blue in the white. I rarely use the white, but I did for a painting that I just made. And I'm going to look at this before I clean it to see if I can go ahead and use what I've got here. And there's a few little pieces that I think I can go from. So this is good paint. Don't feel that you have to throw it away and clean your palette every single time. So let's just start by using it. Now, I think what I'm going to start with is the number 6 round. And I am going to go into the sap green. I do like sap green. You can pre-wet your paints if you like. It's not a requirement, but you certainly can. Keep going into the sap green here. In this particular set, the sap green is pretty light. If you would rather mix your green, you can certainly do that with a yellow. I would use the lemon yellow and the ultramarine blue, or the lemon and the phthalo blue. But let's just go ahead, put my picture back on, and let's start with the stem. So going in here with this first wash, avoiding the bell pepper, just placing this lighter version of the pigment. Whoops, got a little crazy on my curve there. On here. Now, what we can do to help this along is we can get our brush wet and lift some of this off. Now, when we are working with watercolor, the pigment does dry lighter. So we want to make sure that we allow for that color shift. There, I need a little rag. I'm just going to blot this up a little bit on this far side. There we are. I want that a very pale green for now. Okay, so that's good for that point. Now, in the meantime, let's go ahead and mix up some green. I think I'm going to go ahead and go into that lemon yellow here. And you can play around with mixing your colors. I'm mixing a phthalo green with this lemon yellow to create kind of a spring green. If you have that paint in your set, spring green, that's a good one to use. Now we can come back here and fill this part in. There we are. Now we'll let those sit for just a moment. And now what I'm going to do is, using the same number 6 brush, let's go into, I do want to clear a space on my palette here. I'm going to just spray this area with some water here and clean it up. When you're working at home, I don't recommend putting your paints this close to your painting. I'm just trying to have everything in the same shot for you guys so that you can see what's going on. There we go. Okay, so now back to our number 6. Got some eraser crumbs on my paper towel here. I'm going to go into, I'm going to make a purple, and I'm going to use that phthalo blue, not the phthalo green. I'm going to use phthalo blue. There we are. And we'll mix that with the alizarin crimson. This alizarin crimson is really nice because it's kind of a ruby. I'm going to put it over here separately so you can see what a nice shade it is. It has a lovely pink undertone to it. It's not like most alizarin crimsons that you would purchase, but it's very nice. So I'm going to make a deep purple here. That's what I'm going for. And I want that purple to be toward the blue side of purple. There we go. That's a nice dark purple. So the first thing I'm going to do is go in with the consistency of about, it looks like skim milk. And I'm going to cover the darkest portions of our pepper. So there's a really dark spot right there, kind of over here in this little cleft, and all along this side here. And then we're going to leave room for this highlight here on the side. And then right in here, there's a nice big spot for a shadow. And that kind of goes down to here. Now right away I can see some of that purple leached into the green, so we're just going to blot that up. We need to wait a little bit longer for that to get really dry. Let's see, we've also got a bit of a shadow line here. I'm just going very lightly down this cleft here, and more of it here that comes up. Where else do we have some really dark portions? Kind of over here. This is kind of doubly dark right here. And a little bit on this cleft here. That's probably the shadow from the stem, and then right in here where this is recessed. And maybe right along here. All right, now I'm not saying that's all of them, but you want to get, you know, a few little areas shaded here. And for this, you can use purple, you can use the straight ultramarine, you can use straight phthalo, whatever you want to do. I'm going to go with purple on this one, and we'll see how it comes out. Let's get this dry. Okay. Now with the same brush, we're going to go into a red. I'm going to clean off yet another little well here. Because this red that I want is the warm red, and I believe this is a cadmium red light. Cadmium red hue, I think is what it says. But you can see how much warmer and how that lends toward an orange. So we just want to get quite a bit of this. There's a good puddle there. And now we want to just add a little water to it because we want this to be fairly thin. That's probably the consistency of skim milk there. So knowing that that's going to be very thin, what we want to do is to start painting our first wash of this bell pepper. And we are going to cover the entire bell pepper. So if you like, you can go to a bigger brush, but before you get into really, you know, covering it, just make sure that you're using a very thin wash because we're going to lift some of this off to create the highlights. Oh, giving our pepper a new shape there. That's all right. See how thin that is? You want to be sure and paint over the purple. All right, now we're going to get the brush wet, and we want to lift off where those highlight areas are. I like doing it this way because it creates a very natural highlight. See how soft these edges are here? I'm going to zoom in so that you can really see what I'm doing. I'm just getting my brush wet and then wiping the paint up where I want that highlight. And if you really wanted to lift more, you can come back in with a wet rag, or excuse me, a dry rag, and just tap. And that will give you a hard edge, so come back and soften it. But we want to be very careful not to add too much water because we don't want a cauliflower bloom. Now, if you do, don't sweat it. You can work it in as a feature. But for this, for what we're doing right now, I'm trying to keep this as crisp as possible and not have too many backgrounds or cauliflower blooms. All right, and the reason I wanted to do it this way is because the highlights here, they are white, but they have to have a little bit of that bell pepper color in them, because that is the way things work. There's always some of that, some of the color of the item. Now here, see that? I got a big cauliflower bloom right there. So we're not going to sweat it. We're just going to keep going, and we'll fix that as it goes along. I'm going to lift some of this off down here. There. Now I'm going to dry this again. I'm going to go ahead and just leave the cauliflower bloom there, and we'll work around it because it's very simple to get that, and I want to show you what to do with it. So right now it's looking pretty weird, but we will get beyond this phase and we'll be able to rise above. Now, this right here where I went beyond the line, I really don't like that. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a background on this piece and cover that up with some darkness. So let's look ahead to that. Now we take the same puddle of cadmium red. Let's put some more in. A little bit thicker this time. And this time I'm going to add some of that alizarin crimson to it. We're looking for that beautiful red bell pepper shade. That is quite lovely right there. Now we want this to be a little bit thicker than what we had before. And now we're going to be a little more cognizant of these areas where we've got the highlights. We're still going to paint over the shadows. But we want to be a little more cognizant of these areas where we have highlights. So now I'm going to be working kind of one lobe at a time. And because of the transparent nature of watercolor, we can really enjoy the graphic nature of the way that this painting is going to come out. Because we can definitely see that shadow underneath. So there's that lobe. And let's see, now I want to go into, let's make more paint because we're going to need more paint. Now let's work on these in the back here. A little too much paint on my brush, so I just rolled it off on the paper towel there. And then I'll come back and fill that in. There we are. And now we're going to come back and do this piece. And there's a nice highlight right in here. Now let's see, we've got a highlight down here. There we go, and this little highlight, that's kind of all it has right there. And this has a little red border right about like that. Okay, so there's our first two. And now we're going to go into this one, I think. Now I know I said I was right-handed, and I could have certainly painted this from the other direction. But I wanted to start here with this one so that I could have a reference point. So we're going to just try and be really careful and not set our finger in the paint, just like I did just there. Focal point, I should say, not reference point. Now, if you haven't already, you might feel like this is kind of entering a hot mess phase. Don't worry about that. Everything in watercolor always looks a little bit odd before it's finished. It's kind of like you're bringing an image into focus. Now, we've used the pale nature of that first wash to our advantage because we've got those nice soft highlights. And now when we come in with this brighter, bolder version of the red, we can really create intense contrast, which gives us a nice style to this piece. We're really going for a graphic nature of this bell pepper. So let's just continue and see where this takes us. Once you've filled in that next wash, that next glaze of color, now we can go in with a wet brush and kind of smudge up these shadows a little bit, or the highlights rather. So what I'm doing is I'm getting my brush wet, tapping it off on the towel, and just like when we lift it off, this time what we're doing is blending in. So you're going to get your brush wet, tap it on your towel, and then just smudge that pigment line a little bit so that you can soften up that edge. Now, some of the towel tapping that I'm doing is really, really fast, and it's kind of off camera, so you may not see it, but trust me, I'm doing it. It's there. If you don't, you will end up with a cauliflower bloom or a back run, and that's when your water levels are just imbalanced, and that's what happened to me up there on the top right of the pepper earlier. But as you can see, we've painted over it, and no harm done, so that's really great. I'm just using the next boldness of this second wash that we have on here to kind of help bring those highlights up in value a little bit. You'll notice that when you're working with watercolor, once you paint one aspect of it or one element in your painting, other elements tend to look like they need some work. Part of that is because of color shift. In fact, it's largely due to color shift when things dry, and part of it is just due to the way that watercolor kind of flows and moves. Sometimes when you thought you might end up with a hard edge on something, actually it ended up too soft, or vice versa. So what I'm doing now is I'm going in and I'm punching up the shadows. So I've already punched up the highlights a little bit. Now I'm punching up the shadows. I've added some phthalo blue to that same red mix that I used on the bell pepper in its entirety. And I'm just kind of doing another wash over these shadowy parts. I'm adding a little bit here and there and just really looking at my reference photo closely to see what needs to be just a shade lighter. And you can see I'm doing that lifting off technique here in this shadow. And that is, again, where we dip our brush in the water, tap it off on the paper towel, and then kind of swipe firmly over the area where we want to lift the color. I'm just blending this purple pigment in a little bit, getting that cleared away from that highlight there, just kind of trying to make sure that everything looks cohesive in the plan that I had. Now, I want this to look graphic in nature, but I will be 100% honest with you. When I first started this painting, I didn't think it would look this graphic, but once I started doing it, I thought it looked kind of cool, so I decided to go with it. This is something that happens to me all the time in art, and to be honest, it is one of the ways that I found my style as an artist, so I'm going to share this with you. It's more of an experiential thing than it is actually a tip that you can replicate, but if you have an idea in your painting and you want it to go a certain way, and you think, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this first step, this will be my third step, this will be my fifth step, and so on. Of course, you'll put in the even-numbered steps in between. Anyway, when you're working along, you might discover that, oh, that would be fun with a little pop of yellow in it. Or perhaps maybe if I put a little pop of green over here. And that might actually take you down a different road on your painting. It's not a bad thing. Don't think of it as a fail in your original mission. Think of it as an enhancement. I like letting the art, the piece that I'm creating, speak for itself. Now, I know that might sound a little bit weird, but what I like to do is I do have a plan whenever I sit down to my sketchbook or wherever I am painting. I always have a plan. The percentage of times that whatever I'm working on comes out exactly as planned is very, very low. I've learned to embrace that. I've learned to accept that whatever I'm working with as an artist, whatever my skills are, whatever limitations I have in skill, I can use those to my advantage. What if I am also, let's say I'm in plein air and a big cloud comes overhead? Well, that's going to change the light. Maybe I want to use that instead. Maybe I like that better than the lighting that I originally started with. So then I can change my palette accordingly. And just as I'm doing here with this pepper, I am finding as I'm lifting off and adding more washes and adjusting these tones, I am finding new shapes in the pepper as it emerges. And I'm really having fun. I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying deciding which highlight is going to be the strongest. I'm enjoying adjusting the value between them. I'm really enjoying creating the shape that's emerging from this pepper. And I'm really liking the graphic nature of these shadows. So let's just continue along this path and let's see how we can finish up the stem. The first thing that I want to do with this stem is while I have this purpley red on my brush, I want to put a thin wash of it over the green. Not only is that kind of the opposite on the color wheel, but it will also help to establish that some of the light that's shining on the pepper is bouncing a reflection back up onto the stem. It's not going to be apparent in the end, but it will make a difference in the next wash that we put on top of the stem. And that will happen by just giving it a little bit more dimension, helping it not to look quite so flat. So we're just going to get this dry and we will come right back to it. Now here's where you kind of have to be careful. I've let it dry and I've decided I kind of don't like the way some of these lobes on the pepper look. So I'm just going to tweak them a little bit. Be careful if you do this to not overwork your painting. The desire to keep going often outweighs the worth of the result. So just remember that little axiom and be careful not to overwork whatever it is you're working on. You will know that something is getting overworked because you'll kind of see that flat, too opaque gaze or haze rather come over your painting. Once you can start to identify that, then you'll know about what point in time that happens, and just kind of pull yourself back and stop before that occurs. Now I think it's time to work on the stem. Let's go ahead and go in with a very thin wash of the sap green first, and then we'll go in and punch things up to really give it some nice contrast in light and shadow. In order to make this really dark, I wanted to replicate that phthalo blue. That's the same blue that I used for the shadow of the pepper, so we're going to replicate that up here in the stem. Into that puddle of sap green that I've made, I've just added a little bit of phthalo blue. You can see it in the middle there on the left. It's kind of dark. Drop it in wet on the right-hand side. I'm going to pull this up so that you can kind of see what's happened. It's still a little bit wet. I'll probably dry it, but do you see how that shadow just really kind of merged in with the green? And I'm really liking how the graphic nature of this, and we're going to go in with a dark background here to cover that up. I am going to make sure that this is thoroughly dry here. Since right here, I feel like this portion of the line is just a little bit too hard. So I'm going to get my brush wet and just very gently kind of scrub that. And then I'm going to move this pigment around here. And since I've got a little bit of that dark pigment on my brush, I'm just going to manipulate it a little bit here. Now I'm going to try and lift some of this off over here. There we go. That's getting a nice highlight there. See how easy that is to do? So that's another great thing about watercolor. Even though you go through with your passes and painting, you can still manipulate it because it remains water soluble. Now what I'm going to do is create a dark background to go around here. Now here is the puddle that I had that mixed pretty much all of the colors. So I'm going to go in with this, and I'm just going to get this puddle wet here. And I'm also going to bring in some of this greenish. So let me scoot this all over to the same puddle. Most of it's up in the brush, to be honest with you. Just kind of mixing this all together, creating a background of the colors that I used. And I am going to go into the black. I don't normally use black, but here we've got it. So let's go ahead and use it. And in this particular black, it is a lamp black. So we're going to go into the black, and I'm going to mix some of the phthalo blue. So what I'm trying to create is kind of a Payne's gray or an indigo, but I want it to be made up of at least one of the colors that we've already used, because I don't want to introduce a new color at this point. So by blending this phthalo blue in here, I can really take advantage of that opportunity to create some harmony. There we go. That's a nice blue-black. And now I'm just going to very carefully go along the edge here. Now we want to be very careful on these edges because I really want this to be crisp and covered. And we have to work a little bit quickly because the phthalo blue is a staining pigment. And I want it to just not adhere to those paper fibers too quickly. I mean, I want to be able to move it around. I've intentionally sped this portion up so that you guys can see what happens when you have different water levels occurring on your paper. So I had to mix more paint, and I went in on the upper left there, and it was dark, so I pulled in some water to pull it around. All of these things are fine, but here again we are letting the art take things over for us. So what I'm doing is I'm going to, since I'm having a very uneven experience with the background, which is just fine with me, I really do appreciate uneven backgrounds, I'm going to take full advantage of that and intentionally make this a little bit more uneven. So I do want to clean up the edges and make sure that it's very crisp up against the pepper. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some painterly strokes right here of just pulling the brush away from the pepper in many different directions. And then I'll go in with some water and really just kind of encourage some cauliflower blooms around here. I'm pulling out an area around the stem that's a little bit too dark, making that a little bit lighter, and just really going in and trying to create this background so that it will look very, very soft. And now here's where I'm going in with that number 6 brush and dropping in bits of water, and you can really see those cauliflower blooms really start to emerge. This is so fun to do. And then we're going to have one final technique that you'll be able to see. And what's so fun about this too is if you've mixed your background, those pigments will have an opportunity to separate. Here's where the saran wrap comes in. So this will work. This is a really fun technique, and it will work on a fairly wet background. So we're going to see what kind of results we get here. I'm just tearing off a piece of cling wrap, saran wrap, kitchen cellophane, whatever you call it, and I'm crumpling it up and pressing it into the wet paint. So I'm going to go all around the pepper and repeat this process. I'm just tearing off a small sheet of the cellophane, crinkling it up, and pushing it down into that wet paint. So what this is going to do is it's going to create some really interesting patterns in our background, which will be a nice contrast to that crisp graphic nature of our bell pepper. So if I can get this to lay down without completely sticking to me, then we'll be able to let this dry, and this you definitely want to let dry naturally. I'm just giving it one final press down, and then we'll let it sit here and see what it looks like when we come back. Well, here we are back. This has had plenty of time to dry, and now I'm going to go ahead and just lift off the cellophane, and hopefully we can see some interesting patterns emerge. And we can a little bit. In fact, we got some interesting patterns on the stem of the bell pepper itself and a little bit on the pepper. I'm okay with that. I think that looks really kind of fun. The pattern we were looking for is wherever it would lift off like this and create these interesting lines. And it happened more so over here, a little bit on the stem, which turned out to be kind of a happy instance. I'm quite pleased with that. And then over here, it's a little bit softer. So that's what's so fun about these techniques, because it's kind of an experiment every time. You never really know what you're going to get. Now, you'll notice that I had washi tape on this from the last time, so now it's time to remove that. And as always, I recommend using a heat tool to remove this washi tape, especially now that it's had some time to sit here. We just want to heat up the washi tape ahead of where we're pulling. And we want to go ahead and just remove it. If we don't heat it up, I have found that you greatly increase your chances of tearing your paper. Just for filming purposes, I'm going to turn this way and zoom in so that you guys can really see the pepper instead of the strawberries. There we go. So you can see some really cool effects here we had with the layering and the shadowing, and of course with that saran wrap going in at the end. That really helped to give us a nice texture on the background. I do see some points here where we've got a little bit of the background paint leaching into the bell pepper. So I'm going to clean those off real quick. Let me show you how I do that. I've got a spray bottle here and a brush. I don't need the brush to be too wet, so I'm just spraying it a little bit with some water, and then I'm going to blot it off, and I'm just going to very lightly agitate this. And in this case, I think I'm just going to let it blend in rather than trying to lift it off. There we go. There's our final pepper, and I'm pretty pleased with this one today, you guys. I will put a final photo up for us, and I'm going to orient it in the opposite direction, the way we were working on it, so that you can take a good look at this and be proud of the work that you've done. I am happy with the way this one turned out, and I really appreciate you guys hanging out. I know this one was a little bit longer, but I wanted to show you how I would go about tackling this from start to finish. Sign your work. I always recommend that you sign what you've done, because it is a snapshot in time as to where you are artistically as in that point, that moment in time, and this becomes a wonderful journal of your artistic growth. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you've enjoyed your opportunity to paint this beautiful red bell pepper. If real-time lessons are something you really enjoy, then you might want to consider a membership to my channel. I've got a link in the description that will outline all the membership tiers and benefits, and full-time tutorials are only one of those really cool benefits that I have set aside for my members. You guys, I hope everyone's having a really creative week and a happy week, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye now.